Adventures in Gaming.
With Big Man Anthony.
And Little Man George.
Yeah,
This is like an intro type episode.
it's an intro. It's an intro to let people know who we are, what we're doing, what's going on, what kind of show we're gonna do, like what kind of topics.
So what kind of show are we going to do?
Today we have to introduce ourselves.
Right. So I'm going to ask you, George, how do you remember us meeting?
All right. So we met. I was sitting on a park bench. Or not, what was it? A park bench? What kind of bench was that?
It's a bench.
It's a bench outside of the pool area.
Yeah.
Where we lived. And
how old were we?
I don't remember.
I think we were like 13.
All right, so we were like 13, and
Yeah.
I was sitting outside. I had just come from California, and I bought my Lynx with me, which was my first was it my first portable? Yeah, my first portable, because I used to play the Game Boy, but it wasn't mine. So that was my first portable. I was excited because it was so much. I felt like it was so much better than the Game Boy because of the colors and the way the graphics were. So I was just so cool. I felt like I was so cool. And then I just sat down and I was playing video games on a bench instead of going to to the pool and swim like every other kid. And then some weird kid approached me.
Not me.
And said, "Hey, what is that thing?"
But I knew what it was, didn't I? I think I knew it was an Atari Lynx.
Did you? I'm not sure about that.
I just never saw one.
Yeah, I think you were curious about it because you never seen one. And so you're like, "Oh, let me take a look." And we were like chatting, and I was explaining everything to you about
No, I was like, who's this weird kid with the Atari Lynx? Because no one had one.
No one had one, and you hadn't even seen me in that area because I had just gotten there.
I never met you before.
No.
Yeah. And you're in my neighborhood with an Atari Lynx, and everyone else has a Game Boy.
And here's the weirdo with an Atari Lynx. But
and I don't know who you are, but I'm going to like go over and check out the Atari Lynx.
You were intrigued by it. I showed you everything about it. We looked at the back. We opened the covers. We wanted to see what the games were like, and everything was so different to you that you were like really. I remember that you were kind of shocked at the differences in what it looked like, and I think in person you were more impressed by it because I feel like you saw like, wow, the graphics were so different from a Game Boy.
Yeah. I was not even the biggest Game Boy fan, which is something we'll talk about. Even though I had the Game Boy, I got it, I think, the first year it came out. But I was not a huge Game Boy fan. I didn't like the screen. I had to get that light that you attached to it just so you could see it. Yeah. But no, I was always impressed when I saw the Atari Lynx for the first time. And do you remember what game you were playing? Because I remember what game.
Was it the shooter? I think it was the shooter. No?
No.
Oh?
No. Come on. You just said, where did you move from?
Oh, I was playing California games.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, I love that game. That's still one of my favorite games. It's just, I don't know what about it. It's not the game itself. And that was one of the topics like I really wanted to get into in an episode is how games back then, because they didn't have the ability of making games the way they wanted them to look, it was not always about the graphics. It was about how interesting the game was, how well it played, how original was it and how interesting was it that people would like it. They weren't all thinking about graphics like they are today, where now the graphics are so important that they leave the fun part about the game.
But Hacky Sack was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Hacky Sack.
My favorite actually was surfing.
And those games looked good.
I was able to hack surfing to where I was able to do I think 8 spins up in the air that you can't even do on because there's a Nintendo version and there's like
it's on a lot of systems, but
there's a lot of systems that have it, and I tried them.
Yeah, and
they're not the same. It's just not the same version. No, it's absolutely a whole different version. But that's how we got to meet each other, and I remember that. Then after that, we were just going out to each other's houses constantly. You had a lot of Nintendo games that I didn't have, and it was just
you had. Of course, so you don't have a Game Boy, you have an Atari Lynx. You don't have Nintendo, you don't have Genesis, you have TurboGrafx 16. So George has an Atari Lynx and a TurboGrafx 16 when
16.
nobody else has an Atari Lynx or a TurboGrafx 16. Everyone has Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, maybe a Game Gear.
Yeah.
So why'd you always have to have the odd systems? Why couldn't you be like everyone else?
I don't know. It's the same with my cars right now. Like I have the weirdest brand, a Polestar. Well, like what is that about? People ask me
Yeah,
all the
which
time.
I've never even heard of until you said you had a
I've
Polestar.
always liked the
The
underdog.
underdog, yeah.
I do like an underdog. That's one thing. Number two, I mean, honestly, let's face it. Like these systems were pushing out things that others weren't. Like graphics were really better. The Lynx graphics were better. So I think kids just didn't research enough, and I think that they just went with the more like common and what ended up happening is kind of like people buy a Apple today. I mean, it's not that it's a bad product because Nintendo and Sega were not bad products, and I did have a Sega right before the TurboGrafx. It's just that I feel like the other companies could have had a better shot too if people would have bought them, because they had very good systems. I mean, the TurboGrafx was a solid, very well. The controller was well built. It was, a lot of the games that were ported, like Street Fighter, had, or what was that other one, Ghouls and Ghosts, and all those games were just better versions. And so I was excited to see something like that. But I was always into imports. I don't know why. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to always have the game that people came over and said, "Whoa, where'd you get that game?"
Like me, I was
So I
that
was
person.
really into that. Yeah, that was you.
Yeah, that was me. So what is your earliest memory of playing a video game? What got you hooked on video games? It wasn't the Lynx. I'm sure you had something before the Lynx.
So people all had Atari back then, and I was like, okay, let me buy um, a Nintendo because I saw the graphics and everything were cool. It was so cool that my dad wanted to show it off to all his friends when he just bought it to me. He locked himself up because the kids would not let him play, and he wanted to show all my uncles how cool the Mario was. And when we unlocked the door finally and got in, we were looking at them just moving Mario back and forth. Like, look how cool that is, man. Look how he moves. Look how he looks like a plumber. And we're just like, they're not even playing the game. They were just impressed by the graphics and what it can do because
Those were good graphics back then.
they were probably from a Pong era. But don't get me wrong, just because I had Nintendo didn't mean, because I remember even though I bought a Nintendo, I still went to people's houses and played a lot of Atari games
Mm-hmm.
what
In
was that system
television.
called? In television. I went to go play it. This friend of mine had, and every oddball system I don't care how bad it was. I just wanted to try it. I felt like there has to be something cool about it because like why did they make it? And looking at the controller had like a knob. Like, what is that all about?
Well, that's why Nintendo was good too because it had a normal controller. But
Yeah,
well,
like today's controller. Yeah,
yeah, I mean the
I think they
D-pad.
invented today's controller.
Yeah.
Think about it, because all the controllers back then, like the Ataris and all them, they had like the Atari had the stick, the television had that circle.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had like these weird. Oh, remember there was one that had like a. Which one was the one that had a whole keypad like underneath it? I don't remember that, but
Well, I had ColecoVision,
I
and
think. Oh, I did have Coleco. I didn't have. Did I buy a Coleco? No, I was living at a cousin's house and I got to play Coleco. And Coleco was so cool to me because Coleco was ahead of Atari.
that's what
So
I
it
had. Well,
was
my
like,
brothers had it. My older brothers had
yeah,
the
so and it was the
ColecoVision.
oddball system to have
Mm-hmm.
because most people had Atari. So
Mm-hmm.
Atari was the system to have. Then Coleco came out and it was the oddball system.
Coleco
It
was like
never
the
ran as good as,
TurboGrafx 16 compared to the Nintendo,
yeah,
or
yeah.
the Lynx
So I
compared
mean,
to the
you
Game
did
Boy.
have a little oddball in you and then we moved on to like the Nintendo, which was the oddball system back then too.
Well, I started playing video games in the arcade. That's
What
where I got hooked.
what blows my mind is you never got into Sega.
Yeah, I did though. I had a
You did?
Genesis.
You did
Yeah,
have a Genesis? No way.
sure I did. I didn't get it when it came out. I got it maybe a year after it came out.
Yeah.
No, I love Genesis. I didn't have much of a preference between Nintendo and Genesis. I I was very impressed when the Genesis came out and I saw the graphical difference for the first time. compared to the NES. That
Yeah.
was why I bought the Genesis. I didn't really know much about it.
Yeah.
I just saw the graphics and I said, that's a big jump from the
Yeah.
NES. That's why I bought it. And I ended up having a decent library of Genesis games. It's just once Super Nintendo came out, I kind of left the Genesis. That's what it was. But I liked, Sega, I liked Nintendo. My first ever experience playing a video game was Pac Man in the arcade. And I think it was actually, you know what? I'm going to correct that. It wasn't at an arcade, it was like at a restaurant at a family party. And they had, like out in the front, they had a Pac Man arcade game. And I was a
Mm.
little kid. And I just started playing Pac Man. And then my dad would take me to arcades to play Pac Man. And that's when I got hooked on video games. Once I got into the
You
arcade,
got to play arcades before you played. I didn't, because I was overseas at the time, and so there wasn't really a lot of arcades. But what I did play, I just remembered how I started was those little, those fake systems, like the ones that had
mm-hmm,
like those ugly screens
like
and
the
like
Tiger.
black and white, like those. Yeah, so I remember I used to be able to get my hands on those because they were cheap, and I guess my dad and people would buy them for me, and I would play those, and then I started getting into video games, just like playing with those, and then eventually I wanted a real console, which
Mm-hmm.
was I think my Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, Nintendo was my first console, but once I got
We had
hooked
the
on,
same first console.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think I think it had it. Like considering our age and everything, I mean, the Nintendo was like the first real game system for our age group to buy,
yeah,
because we
yeah,
were too little before that, I think.
yeah.
Um, but once I got hooked on arcade games, I really like left Pac-Man and got hooked on Donkey Kong. That's the game that I would say I fell in love with. That's the game that made me love video games, was Donkey Kong. And then getting the Donkey Kong console game for ColecoVision and realizing, wow, there's a difference between arcade games and home games. Just that little concept got me like more interested in video games, like on another level. Like think about it. If you go to a movie back then, whatever, and
Yeah.
then you buy the VHS tape, it's the same movie. It's not on the big screen, it's on your television, but it's the same exact movie.
Yeah,
But arcade games to home games were not the same thing.
yeah.
And that kind of like fascinated me. That was one of those things that just interested me on a different level of video games, because I'm like, how come it's not the same thing? Like I'm a little kid. I'm like, I played Donkey Kong in the arcade. We got it for ColecoVision. I'm like, it's not the same thing. There's a level missing. People call it the cement factory or the pie factory level. That's gone. On the first level, Donkey Kong's on the wrong side of the screen. On ColecoVision, he's on the right side of the screen. In the arcade, he's on the left side of the screen. That freaked me out. I'm like, why is it different? Why is it not the same game? I don't understand. It's not that different. I mean, you could recognize it, but
That
that
is
is
yeah.
that's one of those things like that got me way too into video games. That whole idea that I wasn't even like mad about it or disappointed. I just thought it was weird and interesting and cool almost. I'm like, so what is, I don't know, like Pac-Man going to be like at home? Why is it not the same? What about Donkey Kong Jr.? That was a game too that I used to play in the arcade. You get it, for ColecoVision, it's a different game. So that's one of those things. And then you get to the NES era,
The Donkey Kong was a game that got you like into video games, huh?
it's Donkey Kong. And I don't even know if I knew that was Mario or like, was he even,
Mario was my first game that I would, because I bought the Nintendo with the with Mario, and I
yeah,
remember that which what is it called, Mario Brothers, and then I was like,
Super
that
Mario Brothers.
was
You're talking about
yeah,
the side scrolling, not the original Mario Brothers,
no,
which is
that's
not a side scrolling game. That's a
no,
different game altogether.
yeah,
That's the one with Mario and Luigi hitting the turtles from underneath.
yeah, man, your memory is way better than mine, but
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
well, that
yeah.
looks different too, right? That's another game. When you buy the home version, it's different. And then you get to the NES. Now that's better than ColecoVision, but Donkey Kong on NES isn't really the same as the arcade game either. So I got into comparing arcade games and home games. That's
Yeah.
what really I was doing, where, like, I don't know. It just sort of interested me. I'm like, okay, so Donkey Kong on NES looks better than Donkey Kong on ColecoVision, but neither of them look better than the arcade game or even the same as the arcade game. So
Yeah.
stuff like that is what got me, really interested in graphics and, like, could they ever make arcade games, you know, at home? Like, which is probably,
Yeah.
you know, another topic we'll talk about at some point because you're a Neo Geo fan. But yeah, that's just one of those things. Then you would even play, like, so I remember the Ninja Turtles arcade game.
Yeah, that was a big game for you.
That was one of my favorite games of all time. And when that came out on the NES, I was like, all right, this is as close as the NES could get to an arcade game. It's like I knew the Turtles arcade game like the back of my hand. It's the to this day, it's the only arcade game I've ever finished in the arcade.
Yeah.
Like actually playing it in the arcade from beginning to end. It's the only game I ever finished in the arcade.
Did you get the updated that new version of that came out?
Oh
Did you
yeah,
finish?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I have the
did
collection of the old games, and then I have Shredder's Revenge, which is like a new, old school Ninja Turtles game.
release? Yeah. And did you like it? I mean, was it everything you hoped it would be, or
It's
after
as
you
good
got
as I think I expected it to be. I was telling you that I thought the graphics were a little like squashed looking for some
uh-huh.
reason. I don't know why. Like the
Looks like
characters,
it stretched a little.
no,
Yeah.
like squashed, not not
Gosh.
stretch. Like they look a little short to me,
Okay.
but not proportionally short. Like I don't know, just a little. I don't know,
They
like
seem a little thick to me.
right,
Like,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah. So I think maybe it is a combination of like squashed and stretched or something like that.
something. Yeah, I don't get why it looks like that. I mean, it's not bad, but I remember that's the next game I was like trying to compare the arcade game of Ninja Turtles to the NES version because they're so different in terms of graphics, but it's the same game. And that concept just, I don't know, even to this day, like it's kind of gone. That whole concept of like comparing console versions or arcade to console, it's kind of gone. There's really no, in some ways it's like maybe like where the Nintendo Switch would get like an inferior version of a game like Doom or something. You could kind of make those comparisons to PlayStation or Xbox. But still, I think just comparing arcade games to home games was my, I don't know, that was like my real like interest. I don't know. It was
That was
just
your
something.
interest in comparing them, huh?
Yeah.
I to
Not
me it
you?
was to me. I just remembered a few weeks before I got the Nintendo, I got into video games because my dad got me. I just remembered this because my memory's coming back as we are talking. You're reminding me of things. A 7800
Oh, that was
Atari.
the best Atari at the
That
time.
was the
Yeah.
best Atari, and I thought it was weird because all my friends thought it was weird because I had an Atari,
Yeah.
but not the normal one. The one that nobody bought.
Yeah. The good
That
one.
was yeah, that was the good one, but it was the weird one to have. And I was playing that game. What was it? It was like Indiana Jones, I think. There's a crocodile. It was like an Indiana Jones
Oh,
type game.
Pitfall.
Pitfall.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh my god. And Pitfall and this other game that I used to play. I remember. I don't know. It was an over the head one, adventure game, and then you kind of go up, down, left, right, or down, and you had to like you were like mining stuff. You were
Was
like
it Adventure? I think that's
yeah, it was
actually a
it was
game. It's
it's like
called
it was like an
Adventure.
RPG game.
I think it's
And and
Adventure.
and the thing that made me so curious, I would play hours of that game because I just felt like each level was going to be different. Even though each level was almost the same,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to see one tree or something different about the level. And so what really got me into video games was seeing the next level, how different
Mm.
it was going to be. And so like when I played that game, I saw like one tree different would just blow my mind. Like, oh man, look, the tree's on the right side this time. There's like, like that would freak me out. And then when I got Super Mario Brothers, or when I got Mario Brothers, the original, the side scroller, right? Was that Super Mario
Super Mario
Brothers, right?
Brothers. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
side
So
scroller.
when I
Yeah.
got the side scroller, every level was kind of very unique. And
Mm-hmm.
my God, I just want to keep playing and
Mm-hmm.
keep playing and keep playing because I just wanted to see all the unique levels. Another one was that what was that one where you were like no, was it Wizards and Warriors or was it
Yeah, you loved that game.
yeah.
I remember.
But that's because that game is exactly that way. It's like you don't know what's the next level. You'd end up inside a tree, you'd be outside of the tree, you'd
Yeah.
be in a woods, you'd be like, and that game was just like so mind blowing to me because of that. Kind of like another one was Insector X. That was a Sega game, I think, and it was just a game that like the more you advance in the game and you didn't die, the more weapons you would get. You get so many weapons. The whole screen, the whole entire screen was just bullets. Like you were just wiping everything out. It was just that was crazy to me. Just so things like that blew my mind in video games. You know, and the quality that back then everything was so precise. You had to be precise about things.
The
Like
games were
right on
hard.
yeah, they were
Yeah.
hard. They
Yeah.
were precise, and
Yeah.
even players today think that those games are really hard to play. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think side scrollers where you have to be pinpoint accurate
Yeah.
with your jumps and timing. I think a lot of gamers today didn't grow up playing those games, so they don't
R
have those
Type is a
instincts.
game like that though. Like two,
Yeah.
then that's not a side scroller. I mean, it's a side scrolling shooter, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that to have that sort of twitch reflex,
Yeah.
in a side-scrolling game like a Mario game or something. And
Yeah.
yes, I say Mario, not Mario. Like getting married, Mario. I don't know. How do you say it?
Mario.
Yeah, I think you say it the right way, but I don't know. I never said it that way, so I can't change now. So
Well,
I'm,
you know, Mario is the Italian way of saying it, and you are Italian, so maybe that's why.
but isn't it more like Mario? People would say.
Yeah, but the American version of saying it like that is Mario, the way you say it.
Yeah, I say it the American way. Yeah,
American
Mario.
Italian version is what I'm saying. The full American way is Mario.
Yeah, I'm not gonna start saying it that way. That's
Okay.
it. No, I can't. But yeah. So I guess we really grew up in the 8-bit generation.
Yeah.
I went from arcades to 8-bit, and then
But we did get a touch of like
before,
Atari.
yeah, I did. Well, my cousins had Atari,
Yeah.
Intellivision. We had ColecoVision. We also
Yeah.
had an Odyssey 2, which I don't know if you know
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
Odyssey 2,
Yeah.
which is almost like a computer slash
Yeah.
game
I got to play
system.
that one. Yeah, I got to
Yeah,
play that one
yeah, we
at a
had
friend's
that,
house.
which came with a keyboard, like a
Yep.
full size
Yeah.
keyboard.
Full size keyboard. I was
Yeah,
always confused. What am I supposed to do with the keyboard? Like,
yeah.
you know, I never really understood it. But I remember that it played very similar to like a PC game where
Hmm.
you can literally use the keys as up, down, left, right.
And they had like a rip off of Pac-Man called Casey Munchkin, and
What
that's
is
what
it?
you could look that game up. It was fun. I mean, it was like it was like having Pac-Man at home, but it wasn't Pac-Man. It was like, but it was close enough.
Those games intrigue me because I always wonder, like, I like oddball things like that because it always makes me wonder what did they do to it? What did they change about it? And what I'm
Hmm.
always wondering, like, what happens if, like, in the next level they add a special power or something? Because there's so many possibilities that you can do that you can always wonder in your head. But it was always less than I expected. At the end, it was just a cheesy version of.
Yeah, yeah,
It was
exactly.
never like what you were like in my mind. I was building up this like amazing Pac-Man game with powers and all this, and then in the end, it would be just like a really cheesy version of Pac-Man. But just the build-up is fun, you know.
Yeah, and I think one thing we'll get into is because if I think back to those days when I first got my NES, and then we were hanging out, and you were playing your Atari Lynx and stuff, I would say that it seemed to me as a kid in the 80s like everybody was playing video games. I don't know one person out of our friends, out of everyone I grew up with, that didn't have a game system.
Yeah,
To me, it was like just like anything else in your house. Like everyone had something. Everyone had a game system, and
yeah,
I think through time, maybe over the next 10 years or so, which we'll obviously get into, um, not right now, but I think we took more of an interest in the business or the industry of video games than anyone we knew.
Two things though. Me and you did have like when Neo Geo came out and we started pixel comparing games
Like
that were
Samurai
like,
Showdown.
yeah, like you know how when they came out on the Nintendo that were
Mm-hmm.
both on Nintendo and Neo Geo, which I had the Neo Geo, right? That we pixel compared them and we started admiring the beauty
Mm-hmm.
that it was, that like, because a lot of Neo Geo games, you got to admit, like they were like a piece of art. I mean,
Yeah.
they all those pixels,
Mm-hmm.
that the way they drew things and they did little things, and then you would show me the same thing. There were some beautiful games that came out original from Nintendo that you'd show me, like, look, this is like a Neo Geo game, and it was true. Like they did the same exact thing. So we started admiring graphics.
We did.
We did admire the graphics, and I remember we would be like those guys today that pixel
Digital
talent.
Foundry.
Yeah, like digital. I was trying to think of the names. Like
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, look
Yeah.
over here with the ray tracing. Look, this little piece. You
Yeah.
can see a little shine, and you're like, really? Like today but that was me and you back then. We'd be like, yo, look on the Neo Geo. Look, you can see a little reflection of the guy. That's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like,
And they had
and
extra frames of animation.
yeah, the
That's
extra
something,
frames also, and also
right?
we admired the things about the Neo Geo, that it had like that zooming effect that we've never seen
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
any video games, and also we had the parallax
Parallax
happening.
scrolling. Yeah.
Yeah, which is still a thing today in video
It
games. I
still
didn't even
is.
know that.
And I
Like,
remember like
we,
playing Sonic the Hedgehog for the first time, and how many layers of parallax scrolling are in the background of the first level of Sonic the Hedgehog. It's
yeah,
insane. I mean, you
yeah.
went from NES, which had none or one, and then Sonic has, I don't know how many. We'd have to like maybe count it, but it just like was so different. Seeing Sonic the Hedgehog compared to like an NES game, that was a huge jump. That was a generational jump. That's why I bought Genesis. You know,
That's topic number one. That's the one we did. And the second thing we were interested is in the industry.
the
We were
industry.
very into the industry. We wanted to know the people behind everything.
Yes.
We were talking to these people. We were calling them up.
Yes, and
We
we're going to get into all these
yeah,
things in future episodes. This was more of an introduction,
yeah,
but and then what else we could talk about is the magazines, because not many people were buying the magazines. I think
yeah.
we were kind of I don't want to say this because this sounds too extreme, but there were times where I was almost as interested in video game magazines as I was in video games. I
But
don't
there's
know
a
if that's
reason.
true.
Let's face it, guys. Like at this point,
It's
video
not.
game, like YouTube wasn't a thing,
No,
right?
that was our
So,
YouTube.
so there was no YouTube. So everything was on the magazines.
Yeah.
So when we got a magazine, it was all our information right there.
Yeah.
We could search. I mean, we were in the internet era, but things were more like already in your face right there. And we got really into the magazines, and there was so many popping up left and right because at the time, I think the industry for the magazines were big. And so like there was new magazines popping out left and right. Not all of them made it, but it was interesting to even see those, to be able to see some of those magazines and some of the qualities
Hmm.
of the papers and how it looked. Because that
Yeah.
was also very interesting. Like,
And I
you
think
know,
that's what separated us from a lot of people, you know, was magazines, graphics comparisons, calling, video game companies
yeah,
and talking almost like we are now, which is why we're
yeah.
doing this, because we had no way to do this when we were kids, So, we've
But
been
we did
waiting.
have our little radio
We
station.
had a radio station, which we'll talk about. But we were waiting decades to do this. And this was
Yeah,
our first official episode. It took us a few decades to do it.
yeah,
Um, sorry for the wait. But
yeah.
no, I think that the point is, I think we could both agree, we were doing this and we didn't realize we were doing this when we were teenagers. Like we were
Yeah.
doing, I don't want to call it a podcast. I don't know what you would call it. It was something. So we were basically doing our version of a podcast way back when, and there was no such thing as a podcast. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we were doing things like calling all the people like from the industry, talking to me, like finding out the real specs of of the video game system, so that we could nitpick what was better and what was not. We wanted to know everything about the chips. We were calling the chip manufacturers. I mean, we were doing some crazy things back then that people are doing today, but we were doing them back then. So it's kind of where I wanted to segue into like why we're doing this channel is because I think we feel like we have a different view of video games because we had that kind of life and we lived through that from the beginning to where we are now, and how the industry has changed. We have a little bit different views on things.
Mm-hmm.
There's pros, there's negatives, but in the end, yeah, they're going to be different. But we definitely want to hear your views when we talk about our views. But we want to give you our takes on what it is from someone who started from the beginning like us, got really into it, got really into the industry, wasn't just a gamer, because
Mm-hmm.
we also got into the industry. We also wanted to know about chips, hardware, nitpick the graphics like Digital Foundry. We were doing all these things way back when, and today, like he said, took a couple of decades, but here we are today, bringing you all that information. We're gonna go back from back into the history and let you know what was going on back then, so you get a real good taste of what was going on back then.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also gonna be touching points of like where that is today and how we wish it would have gone and maybe where it could have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going with this, right?
Yeah, totally. I think we've really experienced every single video game generation, basically,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean, you can't go back too much further, than the Atari 2600 arcades, ColecoVision, Odyssey, NES era, and that's kind of, I mean, we experienced all of that, and then we're still playing games today. We're still, on top of the industry today. We do have different opinions.
Yeah,
We do
yes, which
have
is interesting. Yeah,
a lot to say. We're going to get to all that, and I think that this is, just something that, like we said, we've always done this. We've been doing this since we first met. We probably had some sort of debate over the Game Boy versus the Lynx the day we met, like literally the day we met. We
and
probably
and everyone, every time we meet up or have a phone call, I keep saying this could have been a podcast
yes,
because
that's a
everything that
good
we
point.
touch,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really
everything
good
that we
point.
touch is we're pretty much going really into the industry, what's going on, what points we have different views, like he says,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to touch a lot of systems, especially me because I was able to we were able to share that because you got your hands into some odd systems too. And then I
Jaguar.
some weird oddballs myself. So we were able to touch a lot of different systems, and so we definitely know what's going on. Even in, as weird as an FM town,
Marty.
uh, well, not the Marty. I got the PC.
Oh,
The Marty
right,
was
the
the
computer.
console version. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, we're
right.
talking some weird systems we've been talking about where the video games were on a cassette. So I mean, so if that's how weird of stories we got, you definitely want to tune in with us and Anthony.
Yeah, well, that's how old we are, I guess. If you were playing video games on a cassette,
Yeah,
so
I know that's embarrassing a little
yeah.
when you think about it.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, the point is we've experienced, I think, the entire industry, and we're here to talk about it, right? We're going to do this on a regular basis. We're going to go back and forth. We're like literally talk about the old stuff, talk about the new stuff, try to make it fun, entertaining the way we would talk to each other on the phone. Just doing this, in a YouTube format, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope we get an audience. I hope someone else likes this, because you never
Yeah.
know. But I think they will, because
And I
it's
think if
real.
you're a video game fan, if you like, if you're interested in what was going on in the past, if you like stuff about history, if you're interested in what was going on with the graphics and all that kind of stuff back then, what we were nitpicking back
Mm-hmm.
then, if you're into those kind of things and just generally video games in general, the history, the story, what's going behind the scenes, then you definitely want to tune in with us. And also we're going to be touching other things with what's going on with the industry today in the
Yeah.
same exact way.
The Nintendo Switch 2.
And we definitely have huge different points of views here. So
Yeah,
that's going to be great. And then hearing yours too, because we want to add those to definitely to our show.
sure. The future of PlayStation, the future of Xbox, which is maybe the most interesting. of all the consoles because
Yeah.
their strategy is probably the most different right now, and we have different opinions on that, and we're gonna definitely get into stuff like that. But
I don't want
yeah,
to get too much into that, but
no,
there's a
no,
big
no, no,
thing
no.
I found out about what's going on with Xbox, which I was going like I was on an uphill when they were doing the game thing and the Game Pass because I think streaming is kind of like the future, but we're not ready for it yet. But now they have a whole new thing that interests me, and I think they were forced to do it, and I think maybe they even got the idea through Steam, and I'm gonna totally get into that, but I don't think right now is the moment. We're just introducing ourselves, so definitely tune in. Anthony, I'm out. What about you? What's going on?
I'm out.
We're out,
All right
guys.
already.
Yeah, we don't want to keep you here the whole time, but thanks if you got interested in any of our topics.